Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call our evening program to order. My name is Rob Spanier, Chair of ULI Toronto. On behalf of ULI Toronto's Management Committee, Governance Committee, and Advisory Board, I would like to welcome you all to our second annual, sold-out, Meet the Chiefs Gala. Thank you, everybody. Tonight is a celebration of the synergies between public and private sector, land development, and professions. Tonight is about city and region building, and tonight would not be possible without everyone in this room. Your generous support has made this evening a truly remarkable success, and for that we thank you. A special thank you to the 26 table sponsors whose names are all contained in our dinner program. Thank you to WSP/MMM for graciously sponsoring our reception with Minister Del Duca. It was great to have your ever-growing organization on board this year for such an important milestone event. It also was truly an honor to have the Minister join us for this reception. And back again this year is our evening event sponsor, the Greater Toronto Airports Authority. The GTA has stepped into a major region building role in recent years, and we thank you for being such an important sponsor for Meet the Chiefs Gala. We will be hearing from both GTA and WSP MMM shortly. Before I introduce our head table guests, it is my distinct pleasure to recognize 4 very distinguished elected representatives here with us tonight, not including our keynote speaker, who will be introduced separately in a few minutes. Please join me in welcoming Frank Scarpetti, Mayor of Markham, Virginia Haxon, Mayor of East Gwillimbury, Peter Milchin, MPP at Etobicoke Lakeshore, and Wayne Emerson, Chair of York Region. We are truly honored to have you here with us tonight. And now let me introduce our head table. Please hold your applause until the entire table is announced. Mark Noskowitz, Partner Goodmans and past Chair of ULI Toronto. Mary Lee Utter, Executive Vice President, District and National Councils from the Urban Land Institute. Will Fleissig, CEO of Waterfront Toronto. Jennifer Keesmaat, Executive Director and Chief Planner, City of Toronto. Hilary Marshall, Vice President, Stakeholder Relations and Communications, GTAA. Daniel Hoffschild, Vice President, Urban Mobility, Transit Planning and Engineering, MMM Group. Richard Joy, our Executive Director from ULI Toronto. And the Honourable Margie Sohi, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. It will be an honour to dine with all of you this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, your head table. Tonight is a wonderful representation of what the Urban Land Institute, or ULI, is all about. Bringing the broadest array of real estate and land use professionals together across both the private and public sectors to provide leadership in the responsible use of land and in creating and sustaining thriving communities worldwide. Tonight is an opportunity to highlight collaboration and shine a light on the public sector of this equation. Meet the Chiefs was designed with this specifically in mind, to celebrate our senior civic planning leadership, who are literally shaping our region. With almost 30 planning leaders in attendance tonight, I'm not going to introduce them all individually, but rather ask that they stand and be recognized. Leaders, please join me in a round of applause for the 30 of our region's planning leadership. As tight as this room is with everyone here, I do urge you all tonight to take a moment and get up and introduce yourselves to one another and to these important city builders. As I near the end of my 2-year term as Chair of ULI Toronto, I am proud of all that we have accomplished together at the District Council level and across Canada for ULI. With over 1,250 members and more to come before June 30th, we are one of the fastest growing local chapters in the entire ULI network. This is attributable to the incredible leadership and vision of our local organization, both staff and volunteers, and because of many of you for believing in ULI. Our growth shows that our global mission is resonating in the region. I also believe that our growth is a reflection of our region's role as a global leader in the discussion on urban land use matters. I assure you all tonight, the best is yet to come from ULI Toronto. We're just getting started. Together with the leadership in this room, it is becoming very clear that our region is about to take another major step in the direction of responsible land use and region building. With the massive new investments in transit infrastructure underway by the provincial and federal governments, accompanied by smarter urban land use policies and truly urban-oriented market forces, a new and exciting opportunity is at our doorstep in the region. This is what our Electric Cities initiatives that is being launched tonight is all about, and I have to say we are excited to share it with all of you. Our Executive Director, Richard Joy, will have more on this after dinner, followed by a thought-provoking Chief Planner panel discussion. But now, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Hilary Marshall, Vice President, Stakeholder Relations and Communications from the GTAA, who will introduce Minister Sohi, our new Federal Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. Please help me in welcoming Hilary to the stage.
Hi everybody, I'm Hilary Marshall. I've been instructed to tell you to eat your salad and drink a lot of wine. So we're very happy to be back again as the sponsor of the Meet the Chiefs Gala. I want to take a moment to single out Richard Joy and the team at ULI for their tremendous efforts to bring our community together to share ideas about city and region building. Well done, Richard. Tonight, I've been asked to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honourable Amarjeet Sohi, Canada's Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. I'm sure you've all done your homework and you've read his bio, but Minister Sohi has a fascinating life story. It's the quintessential Canadian story. Born in a farming community in northern India, Minister Sohi immigrated to Edmonton as a teenager who spoke almost no English. In the late 1980s, he returned to India to study under a noted Punjabi playwright and reformer. Perhaps emboldened by the freedoms he enjoyed in Canada, Minister Sohi joined a group advocating for land reform in one of India's poorest states and organized a protest. He was arrested and spent 21 months in prison, 18 of them in solitary confinement, without a fair trial and under false accusation. So, why would a Punjabi playwright and political prisoner from a farming village be so passionate about the power of transit infrastructure to build communities? Perhaps it was his experience as a frontline transit worker. On his return to Canada, and before his election to City Council, the minister was a bus driver for the Edmonton transit system. Minister Sohi is a recent addition to the Government of Canada, but one with deep experience in planning and development of communities, especially as it relates to transit. A city councillor in Edmonton for 10 years, Minister Sohi represented the city on the Canadian Urban Transit Association and has been a prominent leader on municipal and transit issues. He also helped to negotiate the largest construction project in Edmonton's history, their LRT. I hope tonight he'll impart some of his expertise in local decision-making for game-changing infrastructure investments. Anybody have any ideas about game-changing infrastructure investments in the room? Hands up. Toronto Pearson, of course, shares the Minister's passion for transit connectivity. A recent study by Pamela Blaze and the Neptis Foundation, and I know they're here in the room tonight, found that the area around our airport is the second largest employment zone in the country. And while there has been progress, the Neptis study found that it's an area deeply in need of better connectivity. Those who work in and around Toronto Pearson, many of whom are immigrants, live with the reality of multiple bus transfers and different fares. That's why we've been out sharing our vision for a multimodal hub located at the airport, one that would connect existing and future transit lines to the benefit of the entire region and its workers. Let me close tonight by mentioning that Minister Sohi has been recognized with several awards for his advocacy of human rights and cross-cultural cooperation. His is perhaps the portrait of a growing number of Canadians, many of whom we welcomed earlier this year at Toronto Pearson. A man who came here with nothing more than his hopes and convictions, who worked hard and fought for what was right, and who has dedicated himself tirelessly to transforming the lives of his community members. And now we have the privilege of having him do the same for the entire country. Minister Sohi, I think we're all glad that you're now driving the ministerial bus. It's my honor to welcome you to the stage.
Ministerial bus, that's a nice ring to that. I thank you so much for those kind words, Hilary. It's an honor to be here and to be among many of the leaders in Toronto who are shaping this city's future and who have contributed so much and who will continue to contribute so much for this community. And I am from Edmonton, just in case if you don't know, it is about 250 kilometers north of Calgary, right? And our Oilers just played their last game in our old Rexall place, and they'll be moving into a brand new arena in the core of the downtown that people like you helped design. The arena that is spurring urban renewal in our city. So I have a great appreciation for urban planners, people who do a lot of work to build the kind of communities that we all desire to live in. So I am also glad to be back in Toronto. I'm always amazed by the energy of your civic organizations and how they help to drive the success of this great region. Building strong, sustainable, inclusive cities is a partnership between government, industry, and community. This means we need to better align and collaboration across sectors. As a former city councillor and now a minister, I have seen the positive change that can come from this type of work. Organizations like ULI, Toronto are well positioned to provide modern leadership in building great cities. I'm back in Toronto today to continue the collaboration that I believe is critical to achieving our objectives. I met early today with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, representatives from the York region, and I sat down with my counterpart, the provincial minister, Duguid. We had very productive conversations about how we can move forward to implement the budget we announced on March 22nd and look to the future and our long-term plan. The budget we recently presented, I was so proud to be standing in the parliament with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Finance Minister, Mr. Morneau, because I believe this is one of the most progressive budgets that I have seen for a long, long time. Budget that talks about investing in Canadians, that talks about investing in seniors, in families, in children, in Indigenous communities. So this budget is really about investing where the investments need to be made. It offers immediate help to those who need it most and lays the groundwork for sustained and inclusive economic growth that will create good jobs and prosperity for all Canadians. And infrastructure is a key enabler to make all that happen. I would like to tell you about our infrastructure plan from Budget 2016, but first let me explain to you our fiscal approach. Canada is in a very relatively strong fiscal position. We have the capacity and the willingness to act to create long-term growth and prosperity, and now is the time to deliver on it. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio among all G7 countries, giving us the opportunity to make strategic investments now that will help grow the economy well into the future. Interest rates remain at historical lows, making now the ideal time to invest. And our highly educated workforce and our low business costs make Canada in a well positioned to compete globally. But the economic challenges that we face today cannot be solved with short-term thinking, and opportunities cannot be realized without smart, sustained investments. This is why we are investing in Canadians, in our middle class, in jobs, and in growth. As the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, I'm very proud of the plan we put forward in Budget 2016. Our infrastructure plan will help further accelerate economic growth and create jobs here in Toronto and across the country, and help us build strong, inclusive, and sustainable communities. Budget 2016 confirms historic new investments in infrastructure totaling more than $120 billion over a decade, including $60 billion of new money for public transit, green infrastructure, and social infrastructure. As you all know, infrastructure is the backbone of our community and our economy. Well-planned investments in infrastructure generate economic growth, support communities, and leave a lasting legacy for Canadians. Previous generations knew that when they build the infrastructure that has allowed Canada to be prosperous. Now we have an obligation to our children and grandchildren to make the investments that will ensure their future prosperity. But beyond big numbers, infrastructure is so much more than the structures themselves. It is more than the concrete water pipes, roads and bridges, buses, or train tracks. For us, I'm pretty sure for all of you, infrastructure is really about people. It is what connects Canadians to their communities and allows them to be active participants, both socially and economically. Infrastructure is about a parent sleeping in peace knowing that their children will have safe water to drink. It is about a safe haven and a shelter for women fleeing domestic violence, or a safe housing, particularly for those who need it the most. Budget 2016 will invest more than $10 billion over the next 2 years in infrastructure projects Canadians need most: modern, reliable public transit, water, wastewater infrastructure, and affordable housing. This is additional money on top of investments we will make under Building Canada Plan and Federal Gas Tax Fund. But in order to invest immediately while laying the foundation for our long-term plan for sustained growth, our infrastructure plan is designed in 2 phases. Phase 1, which is presented in Budget 2016, will have a strong focus on the recapitalization and the repairing of the existing assets. These investments will help deal with the infrastructure deficit our cities and provinces have been facing for decades. This will allow us to invest in projects that are not only shovel-ready, but also shovel-worthy. And with dedicated and flexible funding for data collection, asset management, planning and design work, we will enable municipalities and communities to plan ahead and be ready to build large and transformative projects in Phase 2 of our infrastructure plan. Public transit is a very important focus of Phase 1 of our investments. We truly believe that mobility is key to creating opportunities for Canadians, as well as to building sustainable communities. I have seen it firsthand, and I have experienced this firsthand. As I was told earlier, I first came to Canada at the age of 15. Being part of a community was very key to my success and my happiness. Public transit is what allowed me to get to the library, to get to the school to learn English. Community centers are the places where I played sports and made friends that support me to this day. Every day, millions of Canadians rely on affordable, efficient public transportation to get to their jobs, schools, community centers, at the end of the day, to get home. But our transit systems are aging, and investments not had kept pace with the rapid development and growth of our cities. And as a former bus driver and a user of this system, I know the importance of well-maintained transit systems. I have seen the frustration of people when they're stuck in traffic for hours. I know how it feels to get to work late or miss a meeting. You don't have to go too far to understand how productivity is lost when we don't invest in efficient public transportation. This region experiences that productivity loss each and every day. This is why, to improve and expand public transit system across Canada, Budget 2016 proposes to provide up to $3.4 billion for new public transit infrastructure fund. And to make investments where they are needed the most, this funding will be allocated based on the ridership rather than per capita. We also felt that it was unfair for municipal governments who collect less than 10 cents of taxes that we pay, but have been required to pay 1/3 of the cost of the projects, while footing the entire bill for running of those systems. So the federal government will now contribute up to 50% of the project cost to ease the burden on municipalities and to ensure more projects get done sooner. For Ontario alone, this will translate to more than $1.4 billion to renew public transit systems across the province in just the first phase. And we will finalize our long-term second phase for the remaining $16.6 billion in the next 12 months. This new investment is great news for municipal partners, but it also comes with some responsibility. How can we ensure that communities that receive federal support embrace the kind of urban development that is needed to build the type of complete communities that Canadians are looking for? How do we ensure that transportation planning and land use planning complement each other? We have some of the best minds in this room, and we have to figure it out. And how do we ensure that sustainable modes of transportation, active living, all those things that we all desire to be part of, the community that we all desire to live in, has to work together. And our federal investments will be a lever for us to achieve that. But in order to do that, we will be needing your help. Along with public transit, we have also committed to invest in green infrastructure to help build healthier and more sustainable communities. Green infrastructure also means building communities that are resilient to the effects of climate change. I don't have to think far to see the impact of climate change. I experienced it firsthand as an Edmonton City Councillor during 2012 floods that impacted many of the communities that I represented. And of course, you don't have to think far back either. Your own city experienced serious flooding in 2013. But we also know that lack of flood mitigation hinders your city's ability to grow. Your own waterfront downtown development, its next phase can't proceed because it isn't under with floodplains. That is why investing in flood mitigation is a priority for us. Another important theme that came up several times during our consultation with communities is water and wastewater, and the urgent need to invest to repair our aging systems. We also heard that municipalities alone do not have the resources they need to meet these challenges, and they need a reliable and a committed partner in Ottawa. We will be that partner. We will provide $2 billion in the first phase of our plan to improve water and treatment infrastructure. Once again, we will contribute 50% so communities can begin this important work immediately. We can all understand how social infrastructure directly affects lives. Having a decent place to live, to call home, is a basic need that unfortunately, even a wealthy country like Canada, not everyone can afford or have access to. We know that investments in social housing create jobs and opportunities, but it also builds stronger communities and safe facilities for children to learn and play, and ultimately to have a good start in life. In January, I went on a tour of Regent Park, and it was a great example of partners working together to build not only affordable housing, but a vibrant and a complete community. So I'm very pleased that Budget 2016 will provide $3.4 billion for affordable and social housing, early learning and childcare, cultural and recreation facilities, and community healthcare facilities on the reserves. Along with these investments, we will also undertake nationwide consultations in the coming year to develop a national housing strategy so that future federal investments have a greatest possible impact. But friends, Canada cannot succeed if our indigenous communities continue to fall behind. As someone who came to this country as an immigrant, I'm deeply saddened by the deplorable living conditions that some indigenous communities face in Canada. Too many generations of indigenous people have suffered the neglect and failed policies of the federal government. We can and must do better. Indigenous children, like all other Canadian children, should have the opportunity to realize their hopes and aspirations, and prosperity must be shared by all Canadians. This is why Budget 2016 includes unprecedented investments in First Nations, Inuit peoples, and Métis Nation, a total of $8.4 billion over 5 years in areas of education, health, infrastructure, and skills training. Budget 2016 is only the first step of an ambitious agenda we have to support all of you who are working hard tirelessly to build the communities we want. We consulted, we listened, and we heard. But it's only the beginning, and we will continue to hear from you even more in the coming months. Today, we had many conversations, and we will continue those conversations. But I want to close by telling you a story that I always tell wherever I have the chance to do so. Because this story really reflects why we do things and why we need to do things. I was served as city councillor for 10 years before being elected to this position, and it was about a year ago, about a year and a half ago, a young mother of 3 children called my office, in my city council office, looking for help. She was on the verge of being homeless, and she had multiple issues. She had mental health issues, she had addiction issues, and she was lacking social skills, and she wasn't able to stay at that shelter because of the behavior problems. And she called looking for help and really desperate for help. So my staff was able to work with one of our social housing agencies, was able to provide her a stable place. Just a couple of months before the election, I ran into that mother at a social function. Within that little time period, that year and a half, and less than that, that mother was able to put her life together. She was able to do that because she had a stable place to live. She was able to do that because she had the right support that she needed provided around that housing. Now her children are back in school, they're succeeding in school. She got a decent job, and she's engaged to someone she loves. So friends, that is the power of infrastructure. When we talk about building infrastructure, that's what we mean. This is about changing people's lives. This is about changing communities. But we cannot do that. And we should not do that alone. We need you to deliver on that, and we need your thoughts and your ideas and your cooperation to build it. So thank you so much for including me.
That's all for now. We'll move to dinner and we'll be back around dessert. Thank you. But welcome back. I trust by the buzz, still the buzz in the room, that there's been some really, really great dinner conversations. My name is Richard Joy and I'm the Executive Director of ULI Toronto. It is now time to commence the final portion of our program. As Rob Spanier mentioned, tonight is the launch of ULI's Electric Cities initiative. Electric Cities is an initiative that seeks to capitalize on the unique assets of the Urban Land Institute to further ULI's global mission to advance the responsible use of land. Electric Cities builds on the three interrelated themes of our fall symposium, themes we'll continue to develop through our next symposium in the spring of 2017. The dates are already in your dinner program. And these themes are placemaking, technology, and mobility. And it leverages ULI's greatest assets, our professionally diverse membership, our extensive international network, and our deep commitment to building healthy communities. It is an initiative that seizes on the unique new opportunities in front of us. This year, the province will reform all of its major planning documents, including the Regional Growth Plan and the Metrolinx Big Move. These plans are expected to put new public policy rigor and improve incentives to better focus city building across the region. As we just heard from Minister Sohi, the federal government is now a deeply invested urban partner with historic funding commitments to urban transit. Partnered with the historic transit investments underway by the provincial government, the 2016 federal budget could be a game changer for our region. But we know that building transit lines, or schools, hospitals, community centers, and other infrastructure, for that matter, does not guarantee good city building. Alone, infrastructure won't improve the economy, the environment, mobility, public health, social equity, or affordability. Alone, infrastructure won't make our region more livable and internationally competitive. It's how we leverage these investments that is key to building better city and region. And how we leverage these investments is not entirely done from on high through better public policies and funding, though they help very much. Thank you, Minister. Leveraging these investments means finding better ways to localize city building efforts, to develop complete communities that we want. It means building stronger community support to embrace the massive population and employment growth envisioned for our region, growth that we know cannot be supported by the automobile, autonomous or not. But it also means attracting the market towards the best and most responsible land use opportunities. This is the challenge that ULI's Electric Cities initiative seeks to address. Applying our unique assets as a professionally diverse, globally connected, and locally oriented organization to develop stronger community support and greater market interest toward the best opportunities for region and city building that lie ahead of us. What can we do to establish the winning conditions for smarter, more sustainable urban growth? Of course, at the intersection of this great opportunity are our region's senior municipal planners, who we are celebrating tonight. And we are pleased to present a panel that cross-sects the planning community in this room. From the single-tier, local, and regional municipalities, from east to west, 416, 905, and 519, and because we are ULI, international. And so I'm happy now to call up Daniel Hofschild, Vice President of Urban Mobility, Transit Planning, and Engineering from WSP MMM Group, this evening's reception sponsor, to formally introduce our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. As the reception sponsor, I was originally supposed to give my remarks earlier, and I'm discovering there's a distinct danger in giving your remarks later, but you'll have to bear with me. So on behalf of MMM, I'm very pleased to be a sponsor of this event and to introduce our esteemed panel for the Electric Cities panel. As the head of urban mobility, frankly, I love this topic because it's really about transportation's role in city building And as a company, we're very focused on the challenges of creating great cities, as you all are. And you'll find colleagues of mine here that are planners, economists, natural scientists, and a whole lot of engineers that are really focused on urban development. So we're now part of the WSP group, and what that means is it's really the same people that you know, but we really have a stronger worldview. And I've been very fortunate over the last few months to work with my colleagues in San Francisco, in New York, in London, and Stockholm on really integrated urban solutions. And that's really what this panel is talking about. So I'm very pleased to introduce the panel. So I'll start with Mary Frances Turner, President of Viva Next. Mary Lou Tanner is the Director of Planning and Building at the City of Burlington. Rob Horn is the Commissioner of Planning, Housing, and Community Services with the Region of Waterloo. Brian Bridgman is the Commissioner of Planning and Economic Development at Durham Region. And Mary Lee Utter is the Executive Vice President for ULI from Denver. So a pleasure to have a panel. And as the moderator, Jennifer probably needs no introduction, but Jennifer Keesmaat is the Chief Planner and Executive Director with the City of Toronto. So Jennifer, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. To be on this panel, you either needed to be named Jennifer or Mary, if you're a female. Usually it's a lot of Jennifers, but there's a lot of Marys here today, so I'm going to try and keep all the Marys straight. I have to say that listening to the minister's comments, there was a moment when my heart skipped a beat, and it was the moment when he talked about complete communities. And my heart skipped a beat because I wasn't really confident that in my lifetime I would hear a Minister of Infrastructure talking about the importance of complete communities. Joe Barrage, did you think that would happen in your lifetime? It's happened. It's happened. So we truly are entering a brave new world where we are thinking in a fundamentally different way about how we spend our money. And we're thinking about how we spend our money in such a way that we want to ensure we are meeting a whole series of objectives in our urban environment. We're thinking about sustainability. We're thinking about equity. We're thinking about affordability. We're thinking about livability. And we are on the cusp, really, of a brave new framework that could, in fact, transform not only our city, not only our region, but in fact, our country. And for this reason, I think this is a very hopeful moment for this country. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today with my colleagues from all over the region who are getting their hands dirty, as well as a special guest. And I'm very excited about really starting to peel back some of the layers around how we actually deliver on the promise. Because it's actually pretty easy to talk about meeting those objectives, and it's very, very tricky when it comes to the everyday reality of delivering on those projects. So I'd like to begin with a question that will go out to the entire panel. And just to keep this interesting, the panelists have no idea what the questions are that I'm going to ask. The question that I'd like to begin with is really about winning conditions. We're making a lot of big promises here. We're talking about sustainability, affordability. We're talking about investing in infrastructure in ways that we probably won't see again in our lifestyle, in our lifetime. We've got to get this right. We've got to get this right. We need all of our best thinking to deliver on the promise. What are the winning conditions when we think about integrating land use planning and transportation planning? What are the winning conditions that will set us up for success? And I think, Rob, because you're sitting right beside me, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you, and thank you very much. I appreciate being here as well. It's a great question. And ULI certainly, I think, has really set the table with identifying three things: placemaking, and I have to tell you, as a planner of more than a few years' experience, to not have placemaking described as an altruistic, utopian, really good thing that planners promote but really can't get there is heartfelt and heartening. So I agree that's a maker mobility technology. But I'm gonna put one central thought out to you tonight, and I'm gonna continue to come back to it. A number of my colleagues were in Arizona this week. We're just back at the conference, and there's always one or two things that stick with you in a conference. And for me, there was one thing, and it was a wonderful soundbite that captured a lot of what people are thinking and doing, and it's this: talent is the currency of the new economy. Talent is the currency of the new economy. If you think about that, I'm going to come back to that a little bit. It means that all capital is footloose. It means that Hamilton is not vying against Kitchener, Waterloo, and Toronto. It's us against the world, and footloose will move. How do we get them? How do we keep them? And how do we elevate them? So I'll stop there.
Fabulous. If you're from the Waterloo region, you must speak about talent. That's an absolute given. Mayor Francis, winning conditions.
Thank you, Jennifer. I really call these kind of foundational pieces. If you get the foundational pieces right, the rest can follow. And sometimes that's a very, it's a big walk to find those foundational pieces. And one of those big foundational pieces, as the ministers indicated tonight, is to get your infrastructure right. And to get it in place and to do it with a determined vision to do so. And that can take extraordinary period of time. And from there, you can be very successful in working hard to get to achieve the other foundational pieces, which include significant economic investment and attraction. And that can only happen if your vision is received by the development industry, by commercial enterprise as being very real. And so I'll leave it there as two really important winning conditions or foundational pieces that need to fall into place.
Great. We'll come back to both of those themes of talent and the infrastructure piece. Brian?
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Urban Land Institute. I'll pick up on the vision piece. And we all aspire to create these fantastic, innovative urban places. And speaking for the east part of the GTA, we're the same. And we talk about being innovative and creative and future-focused and forward-thinking. And so it's about being, for us, project-ready, as so much of this funding requires you to be project-ready and have that vision and have that plan in place. So that's something that we really need to work on and understand that it's such a long-term process to get this placemaking right and cooperation. That's in a two-tier system like we have. There's a real cooperation piece that needs to take place from all levels of government, regional, lower tier as well.
Great, fabulous. Mary Lee?
It seems to me that one of the key things is to bring together the public and the private sectors from the outset. One of the things that is the mantra of ULI is the big tent, because that brings both the combination of the planning and the implementation. Because it would be a shame to miss the market cycles. It would be a shame to not move forward with this special opportunity that you have. And there's lots of theory, there's wonderful minds, there's great visions and plans, but I can't tell you how many cities we see around the globe that plan Disneyland, as I say. There's lots of great plans, but plans need to get done. And so having everybody at the table, both the public and the private and the not-for-profit sectors, really important.
Great, thank you. Mary Lou?
I think for me, my colleagues have touched on some of it, but there's three things: infrastructure, placemaking, and we need anchor institutions and anchor businesses that are going to transform places. And if we're investing in infrastructure, we need to have those other two conditions. We do a lot of projects really well, but when we combine placemaking with infrastructure and what you talked about, Mary Lee, in the private sector and some public institutions, we really leverage that infrastructure investment to be something much, much more than what we see individually. And the payback is enormous. I was in Phoenix with Rob, $1 billion light rapid transit system, $8 billion in private development.
So let me open up this next question to the floor, because the minister talked really about complete communities and investing across the entire country. He talked very much about the importance of social equity as being a part of the Canadian vision. A few of you have mentioned the importance of vision as really being the driver for getting this right. And it strikes me that this is really an opportunity for us to create alignment with respect to vision. And in the absence of having that alignment around vision, so what if you're building infrastructure, but it doesn't connect up with a whole variety of critical components that make great livable places? You know, if you're putting your subway or your community center in a place where you don't have the other amenities that allow for a complete community, that's a pretty big miss. So I'd like to throw it to the floor this question of creating a strong vision and the alignment of vision, because we've got to get the vision right first. How far or how close away are we from getting the vision piece right? Is that where we should be starting right now? Mary Frances?
Having worked as long as I have and with as many people in this room as I've hugged or shook hands with tonight, I think that if we look carefully, visions are unfolding. They've been very carefully long-term plans that have been developing over a long period of time. And so those individual visions, I think, are very much in place. And in fact, unfolding surprisingly to a lot of people when they actually take a journey and say they might leave the city and they come north and they start to see something like Markham Centre or Vaughan Corporate Centre, Vaughan Metropolitan Centre unfolding. The work that's going on, I was in Kitchener-Waterloo last weekend. The transformation of downtown Waterloo, the incredible ingenuity that's going into the revitalization of the buildings and turning them into condos. There's some pretty spectacular things happening, but it didn't just happen overnight. Those seeds were sowed some number of years ago, and it's been that kind of march, that intent to move towards that journey that's been really, really critical to their success.
Well, you raise an important point, and it's the notion that great city building and great outcomes doesn't in fact happen by accident. There's a lot of effort. The West Don Lands is a great story in the Toronto context where there has been decades and decades of work. And I think if we had everyone in the room who's worked on the West Don Lands raise their hands, probably half the room would raise their hands, because so many different people touched it in one way or another over decades and decades. It really encaptures much of our best work. But what you see today isn't yet the full embodiment of that vision, and it has taken many, many years, from brownfield remediation to heritage restoration to flood remediation, to get to the point that we're at today. So it takes a very long time to actually get there.
It does.
And you have to have longevity with the vision. The vision, if it's changing midstream, it's difficult to make it through. Brian, do you want to comment on that?
And the point that there are multiple visions. And expressed in various documents, everything from a council strategic plan to a long-term transit strategy to a transportation master plan to an official plan. And so there needs to be the knitting together of all these different visions that exist, which have their similarities and their commonalities, but there's a lot of different visions out there.
Mary Lou.
I think we've come a long way in the last 10 years in understanding that we are an economic region. The council I work for, Burlington, we have about 500 to 700 single-family homes left. We're growing up. Our mayor, at his State of the City address, opened it with, "Sprawl is done like dinner in Burlington." We're growing up, we're 52% rural, and it's going to stay that way. And we all need to get comfortable with height and density and transit, and we're looking forward to this bright future. He is so happy, and we are so happy to be one of the first GTA municipalities to end greenfield development. And we really want to embrace that. And I can't think that without the work our provincial colleagues have done, that we would be in this situation.
Well, I think that's an important point in the Ontario context, The provincial policy statement, Places to Grow, has really in many ways provided that framework for the entire region to rally around that hopefully has inspired the thinking in places like Burlington, where that's a pretty firm stake he put in the ground, and I think that's good news for the region. Do you want to bring the Waterloo perspective in, Rob?
Yeah, maybe let me give you a micro and a macro. So I'm often on my soapbox talking about planning being, environmental health, social well-being, and economic sustainability, economic wealth. I think collaboration is the order of the day. I think we need to understand better, the regulators, the developers, the investors, what the market looks like, what the changes are, what the pressures are. So a lot of my focus is more on implementing the vision, and that's to the context of our region, because we've spent a long time developing that vision. So to me, it's that aspect, and it's really my ask of you that I think collaboration is the only way through and better understanding, so sharing back and forth. But I think the other part is seeing the forest for the trees, seeing your assets. And so, we've been thrilled to see Mayor Tory come out with the Mayor of Kitchener. They did their San Jose trip as well, and now we're talking about a Toronto-Waterloo technology corridor. And often when I say to people, think about Silicon Valley and think about the analogy, it seems a little obtuse. It seems a little sublime. Scratch the surface a little bit, and it's eerily similar. Scratch the surface even more, and we have significant velocity. Over 400,000 students are in the tech corridor, over 200,000 tech workers, over 15,000 tech businesses, and growing. In our region, 1,000 businesses, but we need that connectivity, as you say, Jennifer, back and forth. We've got a good start with it, but that's what we need to leverage and gain velocity on, and that's not for the region of Waterloo, that's for the province, and that's for the country.
So what's interesting, you mentioned that the idea can be a little bit obtuse, and I think when you're talking about vision, there's very little tolerance in our communities for those conversations frequently, because they seem like we're not just getting on with it, but at the same time there's a great risk if we don't actually begin with the vision. If you begin with getting on with it, but you don't know where you're going, well, whoa, that creates a whole other series of problems. So we really have to, as we are developing the vision, generating ownership into the vision, and delivering the vision, at the same time, we need to be having a conversation where we're integrating communities and generating that buy-in into where we're going. Now, Mary Lee, tell us about the Denver story, because Denver is a great transit-oriented development story where there was a clear vision and where that implementation has really materialized.
Well, certainly the transit system. For a city, Denver is basically half the size. Our region's about half the size of Toronto. So from that standpoint, easier, probably about the same size physically, spread out, sprawly, all the Western city kinds of problems. But the vision of transit was really put in place, was a really strong vision. And the messaging we had a sales tax increase, and the messaging on that was about jobs. It was about getting employees to their places of employment and being able to attract jobs and being able to attract millennials and young workers and tech workers, because our Front Range is quite a tech hub in our part of the country. And the vision, ultimately, because it was shared, we have 55 jurisdictions in our region, and every single mayor in the region supported the vision. The Chamber of Commerce, which is like your Board of Trade, supported the vision. We spent, gosh, this was a long time ago, 15 years ago, we spent $3 million on a grassroots campaign to educate the citizens, to share that vision, and talk about the big thing that sold in that vision wasn't that we were going to build out a whole system in a pretty short period of time. The system is really important, as you know, but that we were not going to take 3 lifetimes to do it. Time was more valuable to people than money. The idea that we would build it out in 15 years, 7 corridors in 15 years, unheard of. And people were excited about that because they could see that it would change their life. So people bought into that vision. And I would say one other thing, you know, when you do a system like that, there had to be financial projections. So our transit agency made financial projections. They did the best they could. We hit a recession, the world changed, and pretty soon the headline was that instead of $4 billion, oops, it was going to cost $7 billion. And I expected heads to roll, everybody to be up in arms. You know, government doesn't know what they're doing. Nobody even mentioned it. It was barely, you know, the editorials were, well, they're working on it, they're going to figure it out. Because I think that vision was so strong in the first place. It was so shared by all the jurisdictions, by the elected officials, by the private sector leading the campaign. And we made it through. And guess what? We've used a lot of public-private partnerships and everything we can muster, but we're getting ready to open 3 more corridors this year, this summer and fall, and the ridership is skyrocketing. And then, of course, the quality of life and the land development is following. So it's been very successful for us.
Well, I love that story. You do make it sound a bit too easy, so which we all know that's not true, because it's not easy anywhere. But what I love about that story, I love this notion of creating a plan that is visionary and yet attainable within your lifetime. And some of you may be aware, we recently launched a 15-year plan for the City of Toronto, essentially saying this is not only what we could build, but it's what we should build in the next 15 years. And we did that because it's something that you can grasp, it's attainable. Most of us can think of that as being within our lifetime, but we could also put it to a fiscal plan. We could integrate it into our municipal fiscal plan with some reason. Now, the irony is, of course, that immediately the councillor stood up and said, but what about the long-term plan for the next 50 years? And I went, oh gosh, we just can't win here. So we're, of course, bringing forward the 50-year plan now as well. It's really very tricky. But I think what's so important there was that the vision was something that was broadly shared. Because this question frequently gets asked, how do we end this dynamic where we're stopping and starting and we're changing our minds? And I do think it's linked to having a really good plan that is defensible and has due diligence at its underpinning, but also is something that's understandable and can be embraced by a broader public as, quite frankly, just making sense. So I think that's, you know, part of the Denver story. That's something that you really did exceptionally well. To shift gears here a little bit, one of the objectives in electric cities as launched by ULI is really about capitalizing on the opportunity of transit investment by building out our corridors where that transit is taking place, emphasizing placemaking, transit-oriented development, walkable communities, places where there is a critical mix of uses within close proximity to key transit nodes. However, we do know that there's often a market tension. Sometimes what we want in our planning frameworks, often frequently, this is what planners say behind closed doors, often frequently what we want in our planning frameworks is something that we sort of have to wrestle with the industry over to make it happen. So I'd like to throw out to the panel, and anyone who would like to begin is welcome to begin, notwithstanding all of our efforts to shape urban growth, in the end, it's often a struggle to get growth in the places that we often want it, and in particular along those transit corridors. How do we get there? Really, how do we ensure that there's a direct connection between what's happening, and we have a market-oriented economy here. How do we ensure that the investment is landing in our cities and in our regions where it will in fact result in the most benefit? Because that's really the goal, I think, of electric cities, is to make that connection between land use and transit. Would anyone like to start with that? Mary Lou?
Sure. So Burlington has 3 GO stations and our downtown, which are mobility hubs. And as part of Council's 25-year strategic plan, we had a conversation with them about where we need to grow. And we said, you know, this just makes the most sense. And we did some analysis on land transactions, and the development industry is actually probably about 5 years ahead of us in their thinking on this. So what we are now doing is detailed planning for those hubs, but we're looking at the land economics of it in a way that we've never done so before, and figuring out how we make sure that development is successful, that it's the quality and design that we want, that it's building communities, and that we're putting in place densities, floor space indexes that achieve transit supportive densities, as well as a financial return for the developer that makes sense. What we are also doing is saying, as part of that uplift that you're going to get, we are going to have a conversation with you, and there's going to be a contribution to the municipality for things that we want to do to make you even more successful. So, placemaking initiatives, quality design of the public realm, investing in transit so that we can have transit supportive land use, and local transit that achieves that. We really owe a debt to Metrolinx, particularly for Burlington. That GO electrification and the service on the GO line, that is giving us the ability to grow up. It is a single determinative factor for how we are going to transform the urban structure of the city of Burlington and make it a much more sustainable city as well.
Great good news story, I think, that you've just told around the integration of provincial and local interests and how they're delivering in much better city building. Do others want to weigh in on that as well? Go ahead, Brian.
Well, to some extent then, city building is often led by public money. And in our case, we were able to take advantage of a quick win grant and initiate our bus rapid transit. The ridership on that bus rapid transit line has so far exceeded anybody's expectations. It's just a real success story from that standpoint. It illustrates that there is the want and the demand and the desire there. And it will also, it has also sort of demonstrated that the development will follow that to some extent. There's a bit of a conversation that we had at our table was understanding conflict. So we have our visions, and visions are good, and inevitably along the way there may be conflict. And one of the things that is the source of conflict is the money. And planners often aren't required to be particularly understanding of project viability. But I think, to your point, if planners did have a better understanding of profitability and viability, just the understanding, the cooperation, working together would be helpful.
Well, that's a very interesting point. I just learned recently that in New York City, developers are required to submit their proformas, and the proformas for each project are in fact made public. And I think this is a wonderful model because it changes the whole dynamic around negotiation. What do you think, folks? I think it's a wonderful model. In fact, Vancouver does something very similar. They develop proformas for each project. It creates a very different dynamic, because the fights are usually about money. It creates a very different dynamic around the negotiation table. Did you want to weigh in, Rob?
Yeah, just on a couple of pieces. So, I'm a firm believer that a healthy tension between the regulatory environment and investment is a good thing. That's what creates give and take. But I agree, we need to have a better understanding of that proposition. But let me give you a couple of very specific examples of how we're trying to create better market and policy convergence. And we've had good luck. On a 5-year average, over 50% of new development is happening within our built-up area. However, we also recognize that our community was heavily based on dirty manufacturing, so we have tax increment grants. We get it. So to have a site remediated, redeveloped, reassessed, that's all a win. And I think to signal to the community that we're doing that, especially development and investment community, is really important. Secondly, we put together what's called a community building strategy, and I was talking to my table. I'm sitting at the dream table, by the way. There's a story there. Talking about putting a community building strategy together that had basic market intelligence as well, and we did that for the investment community and the developers because we wanted you to hit the ground running. We get it. It takes a lot of time to do inventories, identify site potential, and look at market area. And just so you're aware, so our 35-kilometer rapid transit corridor has 22 stations, but has 13 distinct market areas. That was a learning for me, and that was a learning for us, and it was really important that we got that. The third thing, and it's something that Paul Bedford frequently reminds me of, is you're really, when you're doing things like rapid transit, you are attaching pearls. and it is unlikely that you're going to travel point to point in most cases. So the benefit that we have in our community is not only our linear geography, but the fact that University of Waterloo, Laurier, some of the big pearls on the necklace were built in the right place. And then I think the final overlay that I'll mention is sort of the emerging market. So I've got 3 kids in their 20s, and they're not aspiring to a house, and they're not aspiring to a car, and one lives not far from here. But what they're aspiring to is really what you're producing and what we're producing together. So I'm finding really great complementarity that way. We cannot compel market to come and do certain things, but we do seem to have convergence.
Well, which links right back to, I think, the question around the winning conditions. I think you've just listed a whole series of winning conditions that can inspire growth to happen exactly where we want it to happen. Mary Frances, did you want to weigh in on this one too?
Sure. I mean, it's very interesting, and I think it depends where you are and what stage of evolution your region or geographic district is in. So, you know, and I'll use the region of York as a great example. And while we've had we have an excellent long-term vision, and we have our centers and growth strategy, we still have a generosity of land that's still needed for single-family homes. And there's still a market push and a market force that says that wants to happen. And so there's a certain state of maturation you need to get to, and you need to be prepared for, that the development industry is going to want to accommodate. And unlike a recent article on Vancouver, which has reached a place that, you know, is almost unbelievable in trying to understand the forces that now are creating, you know, a whole industry around rear lane housing, you know, producing units that are 500-600 square feet just to have affordable housing for people who are living in the city. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, as planners, as visionaries, as politicians, we have to be open-minded to work with the industry and the forces that are affecting our lives, and know that it's, you know, there's always not, you know, a perfect ability to direct the activity exactly where you want it to necessarily be, but by and large, our whole experience has been with the vision, with the investment in rapid transit. The industry is following us if they're not in front of us, putting in the high density that we're looking for.
Well, I think you've made an important point, which is, you know, policy can only do so much. There's a variety of other complex factors that drive the kind of outcomes that you see in any given environment. And I was reminded as you were talking about a comment that Blake Hutchinson from Oxford Properties made about the Portlands. He was making a presentation on Hudson Yards, and someone in the audience stood up and said, you know, can't we do this on the Portlands? Why is the Portlands taking so long? And he had a very simple answer, which was, it's not time yet. Mm-hmm. There's so many other redevelopment sites in the City of Toronto that are so much easier to redevelop, and there's so much remediation as well as hard infrastructure that's still required in the Portlands first. It's just not time yet. The time will come, and we're doing the planning work right now, not unlike you referenced, to set the stage, but it's not time yet. It's all not going to happen at once, and everything isn't going to change in the same way at once. It's not time for laneways in Vaughan to become secondary units of housing, and we're just actually hitting that tipping point ourselves in Toronto. Exactly. We weren't there 10 years ago, but we're getting there now.
I would just, you know, I hearken back to my Bramalea days, and you know, this is back in the days where, you know, I would come back into the company and say, well, they don't want intensification at Yonge and Bloor. And it was like, what do you mean they don't want intensification at Yonge and Bloor? You know, I was trying to get approval for a 35-story tower. Now this is, you know, 25 years ago, and so, you know, as you say, everything in its time, and now it's 80-story towers, not 35-story towers. So,
but we can push a bit, right?
We can push.
We can push. Absolutely. To get where we want to go. Mary Lee, I'd love to hear the answer from the Denver perspective with respect to the relationship between the redevelopment that you've seen and the transit investment, and how those two pieces have been connected together.
Well, I would say basically we didn't do a great job on putting the land use and the transit planning together. There was, we were pretty unsophisticated about transit. It was a big new deal for us, and there was this belief that if you build it, they will come. And what we didn't understand as a community is it isn't transit-oriented development, it's development first around transit. And if the conditions aren't right for a developer to make a profit, they're not going to do it. And a transit line is a nice amenity, And it's nicer when you've got congestion, as you're finding in this community. But in a lot of cities and suburbs, it's not about mobility, it's about community building. And so the amenity value of the transit varies a lot depending on the line and what it connects to, how fast it goes, and the level of service. And so from a developer standpoint, sometimes a coffee shop and a Whole Foods is a lot more valuable than some transit stop. So enhancing it makes a lot of sense. So we found that we had some large developments where the developers could change the whole concept and add value and create their own place. But there was a lot of misunderstanding, and it's only now, when the system is being built out that's closer to yours, where the transit becomes more of an amenity, that developers are trying harder to go into demographic areas that aren't as high income. They're trying harder to take difficult sites where land assemblage is necessary. They're trying harder to do public-private partnerships, which are always much tougher. They're trying harder because they see the long-term value of it. And I have to say that the advent, we've had huge influx of millennials, and which is a population that's trying very hard to get by without a car. And so these people are self-selecting to live around transit. That's a population we want because of the jobs and the technology and so on. And so you see the market and the private sector responding to that as well. But there are still many stations, and this isn't just Denver. If you look around North America and transit lines, there are many stations that are not developed. So you cannot assume it's going to happen.
Well, you can look down the street, and you can see that even in Toronto, and often because there's a lot of complexities. One of the challenges around many of our stations in Toronto is the ownership of the adjacent parcels, very shallow parcels with adjacent single-family housing on the Danforth line, for example. The subway infrastructure has been there for many years, but the intensification is not something that's forthcoming. So it's really, there's a critical mix of things that you need to get right, in order for that redevelopment to actually materialize, and it can be tricky. And the market needs to be ready for it as well. What I'd like to do as kind of my closing question, which I'll put out to all of the panelists, is really about senior government forces, and in particular at the provincial level here. We have Member of Parliament Peter Milchin with us, who has been spearheading changes to provincial policy with respect to how planning happens at the provincial level, and the opportunity associated with these provincial policy reforms, whether it's a growth plan or the big move, as well as, because we have to take that in combination with the opportunity of federal funding, is really beginning to reposition us in Ontario in a very different way. There's, we're on the cusp of some serious game changers here. At the same time, sometimes our intentions break down at the local level, at the municipal level. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit from your perspective as municipal leaders who are engaged in the policy game. You're very much shaped in terms of what you can actually deliver by what happens at the provincial level. What are your hopes with respect to the forthcoming provincial reforms, and how they could actually help you at the local level really shoulder the challenge of achieving urban intensification? How can what happens provincially really help you deliver? Mary Lou gave a wonderful example of the work being undertaken by Metrolinx and Places to Grow, and how it has really shifted what Burlington has been able to achieve by really positioning the local municipality for success. Really, that's the goal. I'm very interested from your perspective, from where you sit, what can the province do that can help you deliver sustainable development and urban intensification? And maybe I'll flip it around, and I'll start with Mary Lou, and we'll work this way. And Mary Lee, if you want to weigh in, I know this is a bit of an Ontario question, you're more than welcome to do so as well.
So a couple of things from my perspective. We really are one economic region, and whether it's Brian or Rob or where I work in Burlington and where I used to work in Niagara, we have to be invested in all of us succeeding. It's no longer a competition for growth between municipalities. It's a collaborative growing this regional economy. I think for me, the number one thing continues to be invest and support in transit. It is critical to the economy of this region that we live and work in. It's critical to moving goods and people. It's critical to creating opportunities for transit-oriented development like Mary Lee talked about, and keeping talent that Rob talked about. Millennials, they don't want to own cars, they don't want to own houses. They want to live near transit. They want to be able to live in Toronto and work in Burlington or Oakville, or live in Burlington or Oakville and work in Toronto. And we're seeing a fundamental shift in how our economy is working. And we need to be invested in our total and complete shared success. And that's the future we need to focus on.
Great, thank you. Mary Lee?
Two thoughts. You know, we often say you can't have a great city if you don't have a great downtown. But you also can't have a great downtown if you don't have a great region. And so I agree totally with you that it is, the whole picture has to be there, and putting that together. And as much as I am passionate about transit, I've worked in the transit world personally for many years, the issue we hear when I go to Hong Kong, when I go to London, when I go to San Francisco, the issue is about affordable housing. And that part of infrastructure is equally important. And today I was fortunate enough to get a wonderful tour from Richard in the region as well as downtown in this city. And you know, you have such a spectacular place here. And the part of it, when I was checking out what are the prices, you know, what are the rents, what are things going for, what are they selling for, it's still pretty affordable. You are not as expensive as San Francisco, London, Manhattan. You know, it's still possible here. It isn't too late. But if it becomes too expensive, if it does not give people choices, if it is not affordable throughout the region, you are going to lose a lot of your competitive advantage on the planet right now. And I really urge you to think about affordable housing as part of the component as you think about the rest of all the important infrastructure.
Great, thank you. Brian, the provincial lens.
Well, I'm not sure we're going to see a change to the growth plan or any of the other plans that are under review that is going to crack the nut and say that's what we needed to have happen. It continues to be, I think, the other themes that we've all talked about, and I'll go back to the sharing of the best practices and the information that's being developed elsewhere. That's really what's very beneficial for us, for example, talking about the evolution. It is an evolution and it takes time, and you've got to have the right pieces in place, starting with the right vision.
Great, thank you. Mary Frances?
Bottom line, financial investment. It's so critically important. These huge and large infrastructure projects that we're so far behind on across the country, you know, they take so long to get liftoff. You know, there are years of time that are needed to be spent in agreements and preliminary engineering and activities. And you know, there's a real anxiety, which I think everyone is feeling, and we so welcome the federal engagement now on this scene. We've been up and down Parliament Hill, I think, for 15 years in the cold and the wet and the rain, asking for this engagement, and we're so grateful now to see it happening both at the provincial and federal level. And if we can move beyond singular budgets and singular announcements into a sustained funding strategy for this country, we'll have done something really great that can allow us to count on our ability to really deliver sustainable development over the long term.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Rob.
Follow. So I really need to underscore the connectivity part as well, the affordable housing and the provincial and federal needs for both to be participants. I think as well, and just so you know, this is sort of not serendipity that we're together as the planning commissioners. We meet every couple of months and we grapple with these very issues too. And so as nice as it is to see everybody together, it's a familiar conversation to us too. But I think just a couple of other specifics. One is we have skin in the game as municipalities. And so in our region, I can speak to it, we have $253 million in our latest rapid transit initiative that is local, ratepayers' money. We just assembled a 4-acre multimodal hub. We did it quietly for 5 years. We just finished it. We got it rezoned. Always a good exercise for a regulator, too, to have to rezone their own property. But sort of two other things, and I'll just speak to them really briefly. One is Ontario Municipal Board reform. And I'm going to go so far as to say it's too expensive, it takes too much time, and the outcomes are too uncertain. It works against investment, it works against community prosperity. We need to have a system of natural justice and appeal. I don't think it's quite right. I think the board has some extremely competent people. I think they're overwhelmed, and I think we need systemic change. The second thing I'll mention very briefly is employment lands, and this is a chestnut that we continue to struggle with. How do you deal with employment lands, and especially strategic employment lands? And strategic in our region is just south of our international airport, north of the 401, just off of Highway 7. 400 series highways can be strategic. There's many, many ways to describe strategic. I'm just not sure we have it right. So when site locators call and they don't know us, if they can't find you on the website, and if you don't have land, you're not in the game. And I'm not sure that we have the policy framework in place that allows us to create and protect employment lands, because once they're gone, they're gone. So that's sort of a challenge to all of us, I think, to figure out how do we do that, because we are in a global economy.
Well, thank you very much. A very different perspective, I thought, on each of the comments, and very insightful. I hope that, like me, you feel encouraged when you hear some of the top leadership in this region talking about not only what they're implementing and bringing forward, but also what they're struggling with, some of the real work that we're trying to figure out in order to ensure that there is a shared vision that is implementable, that is being advanced in this region. I'd like to congratulate ULI for putting together this event again for a second year. I think it's a tremendous testament to our region that when you in fact get city leaders from across this region together onto the stage, that you actually hear that there is a tremendous amount of shared thinking, that we have in fact hitched our futures together and recognize that our prosperity as a region is shared, and the extent to which that we collaborate is in fact going to drive forward the prosperity of all in this region. And I must just conclude by highlighting the comment that I think several of the panelists made around the importance of having appropriate funding. Because the real risk that we face with respect to transit, given the magnitude of the investments that are required, as well as the gap that we need to fill, because we essentially missed an entire generation of transit building in this region. We were stale for an entire generation. Oh, Paris didn't stop. Paris kept building and building and building. London didn't stop. London kept building and building and building. But in our region, we stopped for 30 years. And now we're on the cusp of righting that. But the challenge is the magnitude of the investment required to catch up is quite overwhelming. And we need to ensure that we're not afraid of righting that wrong and doing our part in this generation and making significant dramatic investments in transit, because really that's the hook. That really is the hook that everything we're trying to do, attracting talent, ensuring millennials are attracted to our region, ensuring that affordable housing is viable for all, really the hook it all hangs on is getting that transit investment right. So thank you to ULI for Electric Cities, for provoking this conversation, and for bringing us together today. Thank you.
And I want to thank the panel. That was very, very stimulating for a late evening on a Thursday, on a long week. That was tremendous. It really gave us some great advice to move our electric cities forward. Just to extend a few more thank yous and close out the evening and get everybody on their way, I want to thank each and every one of you here. Almost every single table in this room is a sponsor of this event. An amazing thing that we were able to sell out, and we're just so thrilled to have your support. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I especially want to thank, coming back for the second year in a row, Toronto Pearson. Your support is just amazing. Hillary, your leadership has taken Toronto Pearson into the realm that we've not seen before from our central airport. It's just amazing and tremendous. Want to welcome as our reception sponsor, WSP MMM Group. Wonderful to have your support, as you have many times in the past supported us. Thank you once again. Minister Sohi, you were supposed to leave after your remarks, and here you are. My goodness, thank you. You're listening. Thank you. But the biggest thank you I have to extend, because this is Meet the Chiefs, is to our special guests around the room at each table and on the panel, of course, our chief and senior planners from around the municipal realm of the entire region. You are the people we are celebrating tonight and want to continue to celebrate going forward. You are, as I said, at the intersection of success for ULI, and we want to work as your partners going forward. So thank you for giving yet another evening. Your world, I know your careers swallow up evenings one after another, and here you gave us one more. So thank you so much for that. Thank you everybody for attending. We look forward to seeing you next year. We have a symposium attached to next year's Meet the Chiefs, so going to be an extra special year. Lots of work to do between now and then. So thank you all and have a very good night.